Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Dustin Saldarriaga, an immigration lawyer with Scott Legal PC in New York City, and today I'll be answering one of the most common questions we get. What is the difference between a visa and status? This is a very important question because it gets at two pieces of information that are critical for anyone visiting the US: the visa validity period and the authorized period of stay. Before diving in, please take a moment to subscribe. By doing so, you'll stay updated on the most current and highest quality information about options to visit, work, or live in the United States. So let's get back to our question and talk about the difference between a visa and status. And let's do that by following the path of a person who comes to the US to start a small business. Let's call our hypothetical visitor Oscar. Oscar is from Switzerland. He applies for an E2 visa, which the consulate gives him. When Oscar looks at his visa, he notices that it has an issue date of January 1st, 2023, and an expiration date of December 31st, 2026. This 4-year period from January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2026 is the visa validity period. This is the time frame during which Oscar can request entry into the United States. Oscar can seek entry to the US on any date within this time frame. In other words, even if he waits 3 years and 364 days, as long as his visa is valid, he can seek entry into the US with the visa. But why did the consulate give Oscar a visa for only 4 years? After all, E2 visas can be issued for up to 5 years. This is because of the visa reciprocity period, which can limit the validity period of a visa. This happens when a foreign government puts a restriction on the length of time a US citizen can visit the foreign country. When that happens, the US government puts a similar restriction on nationals of the foreign country who want to come to the US. As a result, the length of time that a consulate will issue a visa depends on the type of visa and the nationality of the person who is applying for it. To take the E2 visa as an example, E2 visas can be issued for maximum periods spanning from 3 months to 5 years. For example, had Oscar applied for an E2 visa with a Canadian passport, he would have been issued the visa for up to 5 years. On the other hand, had he applied with a passport from Egypt, the visa validity period would have been limited to 3 months or less. The US Department of State keeps an updated list of these reciprocity periods on its website, which we'll link to below. So, Oscar has received his E2 visa from the consulate. He looks at his calendar and decides to travel to the US on January 2nd, 2023. At the airport, Oscar presents his visa to US Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, and CBP then decides whether to allow Oscar to enter. Since Oscar has an unexpired visa and doesn't raise any other concerns, they let him enter. At the moment Oscar enters the US, CBP issues him a Form I-94. Oscar looks at the I-94 and sees that it lists the date he entered, January 2nd, 2023. The I-94 also lists an admit until date of January 1st, 2025, which is 2 years after his date of entry. This 2-year period is Oscar's authorized period of stay. Note that 2 years is the typical period of authorized stay for someone entering in E2 status. Other statuses, like B2 visitor status or F1 student status, will result in different periods of stay. Now, Oscar should keep a close eye on his authorized period of stay because if he stays in the US past the admit until date and hasn't applied to extend, change, or adjust his status, he'll accrue unlawful presence. If he accrues enough unlawful presence, Oscar could be barred from re-entering the US. But that's a topic for another video. For now, the important thing to know is that at the moment Oscar enters the US, his visa validity period is mostly irrelevant. In its place, the period of authorized stay, as noted on the I-94, is what is important. Let's fast forward a few years to see why. At the end of 2026, Oscar travels back to Switzerland. He then returns to the US on December 1st, 2026. Since his visa is still valid, if you remember it expires on December 31st, 2026, CBP allows him to enter the US. As they've done in the past, they again give him an I-94 showing that he has 2 years of status until November 30th, 2028. This means Oscar has permission to stay in the US for almost 2 years after his visa expires. This is because, as I mentioned before, upon entering the US, the authorized period of stay on the I-94 becomes controlling, not the visa validity period. So when does the expiration of Oscar's visa become relevant? When he leaves the US and tries to re-enter. As long as Oscar is within the period of authorized stay as shown on the I-94, he can stay in the US even if his visa expires. But once Oscar's visa expires, he'll need a new visa in order to re-enter the US. A couple important notes that I must mention. As of the date this video is being recorded, March 2023, visas cannot be issued from within the United States. Only consulates can issue visas. That means that Oscar would need to travel to a consulate outside the US in order to receive a new E2 visa. On a related note, from within the US, an applicant can apply for an extension of status before the admit until date that's printed on the I-94. This means Oscar could ask U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, to let him stay in the U.S. past the 2-year period of authorized stay that's shown on his I-94. If USCIS grants his request, they would issue him a new I-94 with a later admit until date. While this would allow Oscar to stay in the US for a longer period of time, it is not a visa. That means that as soon as Oscar leaves the US, he would need a valid visa in order to re-enter. We hope this video was helpful. If it was, please go ahead and click the like and subscribe buttons to stay updated on future videos about visa options and travel to the US. Thank you for watching.